This is Twisted Passages with award-winning author Marie Sutro. Now, let's take a deep dive into the dark world of psychological thrillers and meet the authors who created them.
Hello, and welcome to Twisted Passages. I'm your host, Marie Sutro, and today we have New York Times and #1 internationally best-selling author Steve Berry here to talk about his new release, The Devil's Bible. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for writing this book. I promise not to fangirl over you too much during this interview, so I will keep it contained. But before we start off, can you give listeners an overview of what the Devil's Bible is about?
Well, this is the 20th Cotton Malone adventure. So it picks up right where the Medici return ended. And they leave Italy and they head to Sweden. King of Sweden's sister has been taken. The ransom is a little odd. They want the Devil's Bible in exchange for her. The whole thing doesn't ring right with Cotton, so he and Cassiopeia get caught up in this adventure, dealing with what is the world's largest book. It measures 3 foot by 2 foot by 9 inches, weighs about 165 pounds. It is kind of like an almanac from the 13th century. Had a lot of practical things in it, practical knowledge, histories, biographies, but it also had the Bible in it. It was created in Bohemia in the 13th century by we don't know who, we don't know where. It kind of rattled around in there until 1648 when the Swedes came in the 30 Years' War. They plundered the castle, they took the book, they brought it back to Stockholm. Now the United States, Sweden, the Czech Republic, and Russia all want the Devil's Bible, but for different reasons. And it's up to Cotton to steal it and get it to the right one. So that's kind of like the thumbnail sketch of it.
It was an absolutely amazing thrill ride from start to finish, and so very spot on for your brand. It had all of those pieces, all of those elements that really make your thriller so transcendent. You had geopolitics, you had culture, you had history, all running around on this propulsive track. Mm-hmm. And it was absolutely amazing for so many reasons. One of the things I noticed being a long-term fan of yours as I was going through this book was, as you said, 20th book in the series, yet so approachable. If someone had never picked up one of Cotton's books before, you have that skill to just bring anybody. I feel like I could recommend this to anyone, and I have over the years, and people have picked them up and just said, wow, I didn't feel like I had to go back to one to start this. How do you do that?
Well, the trick to writing a series, I was taught a long time ago, the writer Lee Child actually taught it to me, is that each book has to be the same but different. And that's a tall order. You can't be different. You can't be same. You got to be the same but different. So what's the same? Action, history, secrets, conspiracies. Cotton Malone, Stephanie, Cassiopeia, those characters are there. What's different? The history, the important geopolitical thing, the so what of the story, the bad guy, the settings. These are things that are different each book. So each one has to be that way. And I write them on purpose. If you read them in order, okay, you'll recognize a couple things here and there. But if you haven't read them in order, those things will not annoy you because you won't even know what they are. You won't pay attention to it. You won't pay attention to what they are. But if you've read a few books in the past, you go, I know what that is. Oh, I know what that is. I know what he means by that little reference right there. And I try to keep the references very vague. It's kind of like you're at a party and everybody's over in a corner whispering to each other and you're not privy to that, and it would be very annoying. And that's the same thing when a writer has a series and puts all these little things in there that he just thinks is so cool, but the reader hasn't read 19 other books. So I make it where you can start. I've had people read the series backwards, actually. So you can do it. It's not a problem. There are a couple surprises in a few of the books along the way that do affect later books. But that'd be about the only thing. And they're few and far between, very much so.
And I think those surprises, looking back on it, are so very good that if you did start later, you'd want to go say, well, how did that unfold? How did that come to be? So you'd
I hope
want to
so.
go get the backstory.
That's what I want. I hope people, they can pick it up anywhere because each book deals with a different aspect of history. So you can start with what you are interested in because they're from all across the spectrum.
You always find these amazing hooks talking about geopolitics and history and how they're woven and how you create some fictional contemporary timelines around these things. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing. You talked about the setup for this being a kidnapping.
Mm-hmm.
And I read some of the information you included in the book in your author's notes.
Mm-hmm.
And I was curious if you could tell listeners a little bit about the inspiration for the idea of that kidnapping.
Yeah. I was in Sweden. We were doing the research. Elizabeth and I, we were in the old town of Stockholm. We were there at Christmas time, so it was snowing. It was very nice. It was beautiful. And we were on these back streets. And the guide who was with us, lovely lady who was really helping, and she said, "Come here, I want to show you something." And we went up, and I looked down the street, and here comes this older lady walking a dog. She's got her coat on, she's covered, and she's minding her own business. She's walking her dog like everybody walks a dog. And no one's paying her any attention. No one said does anything. And the lady whispered to me, she said, "That's the King of Sweden's sister." And I went, "Well, where's her security people?" She said, "She doesn't like that. She doesn't want any security." And Swedes pride themselves on being very loose on those issues of security. They're not quite like we are in that regard. They're very free, kind of do your own thing. And this is what she does. And she does this every day. She walks the dog all the time. And when I saw her, it hit me immediately. I went, okay, I know what I can do now. The story began to gel in my mind. And I watched her. She went over to the little Iron Boy, which is the little monument that's in the novel. It's real. It actually does exist. And I watched her for about 15 minutes or so, and then she went back. She disappeared. So that really is where the inspiration came from for the kidnapping and everything that goes along with it.
Well, one of the other things I loved, and just another thing you do so well, obviously, is setting. And you gave us so much richness in Sweden, so many places, whether it was hotels, whether it was transportation, mass transportation, so many things that you read this book in the end, you're like looking on travel sites to get to book a flight to Sweden.
Hope so. I try to do that because I want the locales in my books become characters. They're part of the story. It's just not backdrop. We're just not there to be there. There's a reason we are in that locale, and that locale has a lot to do with the unfolding plot around Cotton. So in this case, this book's a little tiny unusual because it takes place almost exclusively all in Stockholm and Segunda, the small town north of Stockholm, and then in Uppsala, all that area right in there is. I kept it. Those are all places that we went to, and we saw all those. So I incorporated everything in there. We stayed at the same hotel that Sir John Westlake stayed at. I'd only been to Stockholm for a few hours before, but I spent 8 days there, and it was quite remarkable.
That begs a question for me with your stories. When you do travel, do you have the story hashed out in advance, or is it literally you walking and saying, "Oh, there's a lady walking her dog, and oh, she happens to be a princess, and what if?"
Well, sometimes I have the general story in my head, and I'm going to supplement and plug things in. The majority of the time, no, I don't. I have a general thought of what I would like the book to be, but I thought this book would be something a little different until I saw her. And when I saw her, I said it would be a simple, very simple matter to take her. It wouldn't be hard here at all. And then it occurred to me, what if some other things? And we don't want to go into that because that gives away plot points, but there are other things about it that kind of began. And that novel really began to gel for me while I was there. We stayed in the hotel there, and we stayed in the flag suite, which is at the very top. And it's called the flag suite because it has a spiral staircase that goes up to the roof, and there's where the flagpole is. And you can go up that spiral staircase and kind of sit up there in this heated glass enclosed area, and you literally are 10 stories up looking over Stockholm. And I went up there many a night and just kind of sat there. And the book just sort of gelled in my mind during those 8 days when we were there. And so I went there with part of a novel. I came home with a novel.
One of the other things that's so very compelling about this, the title, this illuminated manuscript that you referenced, there has been so much about that throughout history, looking at the folks behind it. And like you said, its history is a little muddled. So who actually did it? Is it true that it was written in one hand?
Yeah, that's what's really remarkable about it. It would have taken about 30 years to write this book. And it is written by one person all the way through. The handwriting is identical all the way through. What's even more remarkable is the handwriting does it. You know how when you're 20 and you write and you're 40 when you write, it's different. There's none here. It's the same all the way through. There's no degradation whatsoever of the penmanship. It just goes all the way through as if the guy never aged. And then even more incredible, there's not a single mistake. Not one. Not one mistake in the whole. It's flawless all the way through. So that makes it a little interesting, very, very interesting. Why you made a book that big? Because it takes like 4 people to pick it up. You can't. It's not a practical book. You got to have this reinforced table to put it on because it weighs so much. And it wasn't a very practical book, but they made a point to create it and made a point to keep it and safeguard it. And the Swedes made a point to steal it. And it went to Sweden in 1648, and there's where it acquired its name, the Devil's Bible. It was originally called the Codex Gigas, which means giant book. But the whole Devil's Bible, because of the Folio 290. Folio 290 is a very unique picture of the devil, which is in the novel. Yeah, we recreated it in the novel. It's a very unique picture of the devil, an image you don't see in medieval manuscripts. And this is before the Renaissance, so we don't have their changing of how the devil looks. This is a very interesting. It almost looks cartoonish. It almost looks demonic. It's very interesting with the claws and the way it poses and all. So there's where it began to get the name, the Devil's Bible.
Yeah, I was fascinated and I stared at that image for so long because you don't give it to us right away. So we're
Yeah.
thinking about what it might be, and you let our imagination run a little wild. And then when you see it, it's almost as if the artist was trying to convey two things at once. This hideous devil concept because the claws are so menacing, but then the body is almost impish.
Yeah,
And
it's
so
not what we think of as the devil. It's not how we think of the devil at all. And then the folio next to it is heaven. So you had the heavenly. They had a whole images of heaven. So the heavenly world here, the devil world here. So to contrast one another, and we don't find that kind of imagery in any other medieval manuscripts. Not like that.
yeah, it's absolutely just one of those really compelling historical artifacts to choose to put at the center because it does create this natural vortex that everyone's moving around.
Mhm.
It did make me think a lot. I've been to Greece and to different countries. Haven't been to Egypt though, but it's on my list. And the concept of repatriation of artifacts and historical objects. I know that history is very important to you. You have your charity History Matters,
Mhm.
and I know you've done work with the Smithsonian, and obviously you are a student of history.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts about that? Because repatriation is an issue potentially in this novel.
Oh, very, very much so, because the Czechs want this book back in real life. They've asked for it for decades, and they want it returned. The Swedes are not going to give it back. They loaned it to the Swedes, as it referenced in the novel once. And there's a replica of it in Prague, but not the actual book itself. No. And the Swedes consider it spoils of war. It was the 30 Years' War, and they won the war. And at that time, that's the way it worked. You won the war, you take what you want. Today, it's a little bit different, but Sweden shows no interest in returning the book. No. We also went and saw the Silver Bible, which is referenced in the novel, where they have a meeting there, where the Silver Bible is up in Uppsala. And it's another thing they stole as well. For some reason, there's not much pressure on that one. It's very interesting, but it's a lot of it's missing. In the Devil's Bible, you're only missing 12 pages, but those were taken out a long time ago before the Swedes got it. Nobody really knows why those 12 pages were taken out. And originally that was going to be part of the novel, but then I said, no, I mean, I didn't want to go into, the book's been studied for 400 years. There's not a lot of secrets in there. So I had to use the book in another way.
I absolutely loved it. And I had all these questions about it. And like I said, I kept thinking about when I went to the Parthenon, for example, there's folks from all over the world, and we had a tour guide. And some of the folks in our tour happened to be British. And the tour guide had some things to say about
Oh, yeah.
things, the friezes and everything that are no longer in Greece.
The Brits stole it a lot. And the whole British Museum is just looted stuff. And they're not going to give any of it back. Not going to happen.
It's a really interesting thing, because then you see how that does play with geopolitics, and you do see how these things matter to people. And one of the first books of yours that I ever read was The Romanov Prophecy. Mm-hmm. And you did such a good job in that of really explaining the ties that people have in their culture and how deep-seated those are, and how that can even tie into what type of government they'll accept or won't accept, and all of these things that are so important. So really an interesting issue, especially with the new Grand Egyptian Museum coming online, and just how much of a push certain countries are making for repatriation. So really, really timely story, I thought.
Thank you.
It's one of the other things I wanted to ask you about was a line in the book, and it sat with me. I read it, I turned the page, went back, read it again, finished the chapter, went back, read it again, and I keep thinking about it. And I believe that the sentence was, art without knowledge is nothing.
That's very true. If you don't know what you're looking at, it doesn't make any sense. The artist created something on purpose. It just wasn't random, particularly in the Middle Ages, particularly in the Dark Ages and all that. Art was very special. Art was a way of communication. Art was the internet of its time. It was the Facebook of its time, where you sent out your thoughts and what you were thinking. So you have to know what you're looking at, or it means nothing. It means nothing. Now, the Devil's Bible is a good example. We know so little about it that we can't put it really into context, because it's so hard, because we know so little. We only know that it was created over a long period of time. Somebody went to a lot of trouble, and it was very expensive to create. It's made of vellum, which is animal hide, so those were very expensive. So somebody went to a lot of trouble to make this book and dedicated their entire life to it, pretty much. And you got to understand that in order to understand the artifact itself.
And I thought that was so true. And it's whether it's literally a painting, something like illuminated manuscript, even music. When you look at certain Southern hymnals and the context in which those were created and what they were meant to do for communication, there really is a world so much deeper that we have to make sure that we do scratch a little deeper every time we enjoy art.
And that's what I try to do in my novels. I try to pick these things that have interest and scratch down in there and try to find what I can about it.
And your readers are so darn appreciative because it's amazing, because it gives you so much more than the story, and it gives you things to take away and think about and incorporate into your life and the way you think about the world.
Thank you.
One of the last quick questions I did want to ask you about, you do have your charity, History Matters, and you've done a lot with preservation and different things. I was curious, is there anything, Steve, that kind of sits in the back of your mind in history? Any artifact, painting, anything from a prior time that would be your dream to find, even if it's something that we only know about in oral tradition? We don't necessarily know if it existed. Most people would say the Holy Grail, depending on their interests. Is there anything like that for you? Do you have a Holy Grail?
I don't really have one, to be honest with you. There's so many things that are lost and gone. There's so many of them. I don't really have anything. I mean, the Amber Room really interested me to find it, but of course they never found it. They recreated it. Whatever happened to it. Things I've written about all interest me the grave of Alexander the Great. Where is he? Where is his body? Where is it? Is it in St. Mark's Cathedral? Is it really there? Explored all that in the Venetian betrayal. And then, there's been so many things I've done in each one of the books and trying to give some meaning or purpose to it. I don't have anything. I have a bunch of ideas in an idea box, that have formed other books down the road. Yes. I mean, things that I've come across. I want something lost, not forgotten, but not that well known, that has a lot of mystery and unanswered questions about itself so that I can play with that a little bit. I also want it to still matter today. That I have to have both. I have to have the cool thing, which I call the ooh factor of a story. And then I have to have the so what. Who cares about the Devil's Bible? I mean, it's great, it's neat, it's interesting, but what does it really matter in today's world? So I had to figure out, how do I make it matter? And I did with Sweden's entry into NATO, which was held up by Turkey for many, many years. But in my world, it's held up by the Czech Republic. So I was able to take that and weave that together to make a so what out of this cool ooh thing over here. And I don't really have anything I'm hoping and searching for or going for. I've dealt with so many different ones and so many varied things. I do have some I'm going to explore, but I don't want to say what they are. I only want to catch it. I don't want anybody to preempt me. But I do have some coming in 27 and 28 and into 30. Yeah.
Outstanding. Now, I said I wouldn't gush, but I have to just gush a little bit. Your body of work has been absolutely amazing, and I have so thoroughly enjoyed it. So I just want to say thank you very much for everything you have brought to your readers over the years, because your stories are amazing. Now, speaking of your readers, for your existing fans and for future fans, where is the best place to find you, Steve, and what's coming next?
Well, you can always go to the website, steveberry.org. Everything's there. If you're trying to discover me for the first time, you can go there. And all the books are kind of summarized. So you can see which one interests you. There's 29 of them. There's 6 American thrillers, which are basically American-based. And then the rest are international that have a little American to it, but mostly international. I did 6 that involve some very interesting things from the Constitution, very interesting aspects of the Constitution that fascinated me. We did some thrillers, Cotton Malone thrillers with those. So you can go there, check it out. I also have a Facebook page. You can go there as well, Facebook fan page, and we keep all that up to date every day.
Outstanding. Well, again, it is number 20 in the Cotton series. It is called The Devil's Bible, and it will blow your mind. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us on this episode of Twisted Passages. We hope to see you next time.